Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Liebman, and I'm part of the leadership team for Indigene's Enterprise Medical Solutions team, and I have primary responsibility for our MLR service line. I spent the last 25 years partnering with pharmaceutical and biotech organizations on driving value across the product lifecycle, but I think enough about me. Today, I'm truly excited to be moderating a session on balancing compliance and creativity, a topic that really sits at the intersection of medical affairs and marketing. And joining me today is Carolyn Martina Mamber, Head of Communications, Medical Communications for Lantheus, and Pankaj Chandak, who's Director of Regulatory Affairs for Medtronics. But I thought it would be best if they would get to introduce themselves individually and give you a little bit about their background and before we get into the sharing of perspectives on balancing compliance and creativity. So I guess I'll turn it over to you, Carolyn, if you could please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, Carolyn Martina Mamber, as you said, Head of Medical Communications at Lantheus. And what that means is that my group is really focused on translating that data into dialogue, amplifying science to fuel clinical decisions. More specifically, that means that it puts me at a very unique position within this conversation because I oversee medical information and medical review, publications, training, as well as medical communications content. And so that means that I'm working with both our medical reviewers as well as our medical content creators.
Great. Thank you. Pankaj?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Rob. My name is Pankaj Chandak. I am a Director of Regulatory Affairs and Technical Communications at Medtronic Neurovascular. And my responsibility as it relates to this conversation and my team is creating not just, let's say, content, but as I said, technical communication, which is everything that we are communicating to our healthcare providers, to our patients, and understanding not only the requirements, but how do you balance both the business needs and the regulatory requirements, and how do you help the business in keeping that? And I am very excited about the conversation today, and hope you find this useful. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm sure everybody will. It's interesting. We're all sort of committed to this topic, and we have a vested interest. And I would say it's everyone's goal to quickly create and disseminate accurate and engaging content, right? That drives an increase in prescribed therapies and obviously patient benefits. But we know that in the day-to-day life of contact scientific content creation, that each function within a pharma, biotech, and medtech has its own pressures too. So marketing, right, is primarily focused on getting the content produced and getting it into the marketplace. Med Affairs or MLR and PRC, we're focused, right, on making sure that the content is accurate and compliant, scientific, regulatory, and so forth. And I think that the conversation we're going to have is both timely and essential as we continue to evolve in how we communicate with healthcare professionals and patients while maintaining standards, right, in terms of ethical, regulatory, and compliance integrity. So I organized our discussion around 4 key themes that obviously are at the core of this, and that is risk versus innovation, collaboration breakdown, technology as an enabler, and the culture and mindset shift. So we'll try to tackle these themes one at a time, and I'm sure we are all going to have a great dialogue and insight for our attendees. So let's get into it. We'll talk about a little bit about risk versus innovation. I think we could start with you, Pankaj. Where do you see signs of over-engineering in the MLR or PRC process? We're going to use those terms interchangeably, but where do you see over-engineering?
Yeah, so Rob, I think as I think of the MLR process and over the years, what I've seen at different organizations is MLR process is more of an art than science, and it's so much about process and engineering the process in the right way. So you have to achieve a balance between what your ultimate goal is, which is getting content which is completely um, uh, regulation compliant, but also meeting your business need. And that's why I say that it is more of an art than science. And then uh, the inherent risk for the business here are trying to make sure that you're able to navigate through the gray areas where you have the regulation, but the regulation is not prescriptive enough, right? So you need to have room within your process to be able to navigate those, but also enough guidance that you can navigate that in a timely fashion and not having, let's say, um, things that are stuck. And that's what we talk about with respect to the cycle times, with respect to how quickly you can get things out, but also making sure that you've got your regulatory reviewers, your legal reviewers, your medical reviewers, all of them involved in the process. So yeah, that's how I think I would frame this.
Okay, thank you. And as I turn to you, Carlin, when I think about what Pankaj is saying relative to art being more of an art than a science, and actually we recognize here that we have both a pharma and medtech viewpoints. Could you comment not only on the art versus the science and your perspective, but also on the regulatory notion of, is it prescriptive, and is it the same in pharma where the guidance is not necessarily as prescriptive as it may be, and it's up to interpreting the guidance in terms of what we need to follow from a regulatory perspective?
Definitely. So I really see it as that spectrum of risk, right? So you have something that's completely no risk to a heavy amount of risk. Being in our industry, right, we've already shortened that spectrum because everything we do comes with risk. And it's not only about the guidances that are out there, which are very much in the gray zone, but how does that fit within your organization? And so there really is that need for boundaries, right? The creation of very clear boundaries of risk so that they're defined and we're aligned on what is our appetite for risk. And that can then support then the art, right, of collaboration and navigating then that gray zone together.
So it's interesting. I have a follow-up on, so the appetite for risk, right? Where do you think we can afford to take calculated risk? So you mentioned each organization is going to develop its own sort of risk profile, and how much risk they're willing to take on. Probably the legal part of MLR would weigh in there. But where do you think, in terms of practitioners and so forth, that these calculated risks can be taken to help drive innovation?
So if I think about the calculated risk, that's something that is the job of that collaborative medical, legal, and regulatory team, right? So that's something where to understand what are our objectives, right, for the piece, what is the idea of the content creator, and then understanding our expertise like, around the table, right? How can this idea actually be externalized? So I think that there's great scope for taking risks within MLR, but it all revolves around collaboration and communication.
Great. Pankaj, as we consider what Carlin's sharing with us, the risk piece, but also like are all, are all materials, should they all be treated equally with MLR? So when we consider risk, and Carlin's mentioning that it's collaborative and it could be relative to content for one asset, and that risk profile may be different for other assets and other content. But maybe you could share your perspective on where risk can be taken and whether all content is treated equally or not.
Yeah, so I think, Rob, as we look into this, and in the pharma and med device industry, we often use this term, it's a risk-based approach, right? Which is a very commonly used or thrown term at everything that we do. And I think the MLR discussion is no different. It is very much risk-based. So it is based on the type of content you're dealing with. Are you talking about disease awareness campaign, or whether you're talking about a comparative claim? Are you talking about a clinical claim, or you're doing a social media campaign? So there is, based on these different things, I think we have to, uh, where we can take calculated risk is building agility in our process to be able to deal with these different types of pieces in a way that fits the risk profile of those, and we can get them out in a timely fashion, right? So having all the requirements and all the reviewers look at a piece which inherently holds low risk and the requirements are more black and white would not make sense, right? That's where we can go into kind of being overly cautious about it. So there is a balance of risk. And I think all the reviewers in the MLR process, as well as authors, need to be on the same page with respect to how we see this risk and making sure that we are very transparent about it. And that's why I say having agile workflows and agility and flexibility in the process is where we can, I think, take this calculated risk to make sure that our MLR process meets the business needs.
Yeah, so this makes a lot of sense, and it's interesting that the theme within the theme that I'm picking up from both of you is right. We Carlin talked about that the risk would be determined right by this, lack of a better term, cross-functional group, right? The collaboration on content created for assets and so forth. And in addition to, agile, the need for agile business, Pankaj, you're mentioning also like working across the groups. And that leads actually into our next theme pretty neatly, is the collaboration breakdown. So we all know that this is a joint effort, right? Not one person is going to determine what the risk appetite is. Not one person is going to be able to address the risk because, MLR is a collaborative approach, and collaboration is probably one of the most overused terms in business. So if we would sort of take a pragmatic or practical view of that, how do you drive better? And we'll start with you, Carlin. Is how do you drive better collaboration, or what causes friction, if any, between content creators and different MLR reviewers as part of the process? And what can we do to better that? And maybe we'll start with you again, Carlin. It's okay.
Yeah, so I think with the friction, it's really about making sure that you have alignment at all levels, right? So in terms of we are all here as professionals, right, to do our jobs. And so if there is friction, it's likely coming from a misalignment. And so alignment for me starts within our strategic imperatives. If we think about our brand planning or our medical planning, and making sure that everybody is aware, right, of what we need to achieve to be successful. And then it goes into the objectives of a certain project. So making sure that we are aligned on the objectives of a project. Are the objectives even feasible, right? And then ensuring, again, that we are able to have conversations that are productive, right? To be able to get a project aligned with an objective, aligned with an SI, and then out. So really, it's around misalignment that I see as the major cause of friction.
And a follow-up to that is, so if there's a misalignment, so we know we need to collaborate and get aligned. Otherwise, right, none of this really works well at all. But what's the inherent risk for poor collaboration? So if we're not successful at alignment, and maybe it's on a brand, it could be on an asset or a brand level, or maybe it's only sort of a microcosm there. But what's the inherent risk of poor collaboration if we don't get that alignment?
I see two major ones. So one is that your project, right, will not be able to achieve its objectives or ladder up to the specific strategic imperative that you have. But two, I also see that as fostering maybe a culture of mistrust or even more friction at the level of MLR, making things like risk taking more difficult for a team to be able to do.
Thanks. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's somewhat intuitive, yet at the same point, it's really a complex issue, because it's not just like sitting across the dinner table from a family member and trying to get on the same page. It could involve obviously more than two players. Pankaj, if I turn to you, thinking about collaboration, and also trying to bear in mind if you find any, the compare and contrast of med tech versus pharma, any of that individual flavor would, if it exists, would also help. But do you echo Carlin's sentiment, and what are your thoughts on in terms of what either serves as an obstacle or the opportunities for better collaboration within the process?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with Carlin that the trust is at the center of how we would operate this, right? We need to make sure that the content collaborators trust each other, right? In their professional capacity, in their and also trust in their professional judgment of how we are viewing this content, right? At the end of the day, this is a science-based discussion, right? We are looking at content pieces with evidence that is clinical, non-clinical, or in case of medtech, a lot of bench testing data that we have, but applying that to what can be communicated to the users in a way which makes, let's say, sense based on the high level guidance of regulation and rules that we have put in place, and having a good understanding of that. I think a lot of times it also happens, and I've seen this both on the pharma and the medtech side, where there are assumptions about marketing function being the bad actor here, right? And I think we cannot assume that. We have to go in with an open mind. We have to understand the viewpoint of the content creator, which in a lot of these cases is marketing or marketing communication, and we have to layer that in with the evidence that we have, and our understanding of that evidence and how far we can go with it. uh, there is a lot of discussion in these MLR reviews about verbiage, right? And again, the the connotation, the context of this means very different to different people. uh, and aligning around that, I think, is very important. So like I said, I think trust is the biggest factor here. I think trusting in each other's discretion and judgment, and building that is what I think sets the MLR teams apart, where you would see success versus a lot of back and forth, and a lot of time lost between it. And and to be able to navigate the gray area, you would need to trust your partner, right? When you feel like, hey, you have this evidence and you can say certain things, and you have your strategy aligned, where you feel like, uh, I can defend this, right? You need that trust between the three or four functions that are involved here, to be able to give your business that ability to communicate effectively with healthcare providers or patients. Sorry, I may have taken a little bit more time there, Rob, but uh,
It's okay. It's okay. This is what the conversation should be. It's
yeah.
interesting also based on both what you're saying is we really start out we're talking about like how do you foster creativity really in a compliant environment, but what's coming out is clearly something that we know this is it's a highly complex process. We're dealing with the ethics and integrity and compliance with scientific, right? We got to get it right scientifically. We got to get it right from a regulatory and medical perspective. That if we don't get the foundations correct, then you almost can't even think about creativity. So Pankaj, I want to follow up. I want to put you on the spot, maybe, and if you can give, we don't have to talk specifics, obviously, because we don't want to divulge anything, but is there any example that comes to mind of when this worked well, like what the implications were on creativity and the positive working relationship, even with marketing, where there always seems to be this perceived tension that you refer to when it really shouldn't be, but when this has worked well in terms of what you and Carlin shared with collaboration and so forth, like what's the outcome of that when something looks good?
Yeah, I think the outcome of that is your organization is able to play offense, right? Um, if you have a high performing team that trust each other. So where I have seen this work well is when you have a marketeer who understands and does the due diligence to understand uh, the science, right? And I'm not saying that they don't, right? They do, but
Mm-hmm.
speaking that same language and taking the time to be able to dig into the details of it, right? Not viewing regulatory or legal as just the police in the process, right? I mentioned about marketing not being treated as a bad actor. At the same time, we don't want to treat um, we don't want to have the mindset that regulatory or legal is just the roadblock here, right? They want to limit us in our ability. I think when you don't have those barriers, then I think the creativity flows, and like I said, that gives your organization an edge in this
Yeah.
communication. Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense, right? So if we're all on the same page, if I'm concerned with what marketing is trying to get done, and marketing is concerned with what we're trying to get done, then we're literally. I love your statement there. Then you could play offense, right? You can go at this aggressively. You could balance off risks with each other and so forth. But right, if we're always stuck within our same silo without at least understanding the viewpoint of each other, then we'll never get to a more creative approach. So I do like the playing offense statement. So thank you for that. We could talk all day on these topics. Let's move to the next theme, which is technology as an enabler, right? So we talked about what collaboration looks like and how we get on the same page and align, and how we could perhaps drive better creativity or through this foundational stuff. But what about technology as an enabler? Like how can AI? I'm thinking about how does AI support both like automation and going back to agile process, but also support better creativity in the content itself? Is it can it do both, and to what degree? And maybe Colin, we'll start with you to give Pankaj a little break since I made him speak so much. But maybe you could share with us a little bit about how AI could be used across both dimensions.
There's so much scope to increase, right, the use of AI within this process. I think we've already seen the presence of AI within MLR review, but also within content generation. So I think, if I look at the future, I could see AI playing a larger role in things like risk assessment and things like standardization of disclaimers, of referencing, linking, reference checking from the medical point of view, but also thinking about the future of content modularization, right? So ensuring that that is already baked in within the process so that the end user has an ease of adaptation there built in. So really, I think we're just at like that precipice, right, to see of how AI can really empower MLR review, but also content use afterwards.
Great. And Pankaj, can you weigh in on the same topic, please? Like, in
Sure.
terms of, and again, any differences with MedTech is always appreciated if there are any, but please.
No, I think when it comes to AI, honestly, this is a very exciting topic right now, and uh, I think especially in the MLR world, right? There is so much I think that the Gen AI and all of these agentic tools that can help us with whether we are talking about, let's say, um, basic sanity checks within the materials, right? Um, Traceability of those from what evidence and what your FDA approved labeling is, and getting some of these out of the way for the reviewers. So that definitely has an efficiency aspect to it. I think when we think about automated reviews, right, the better you can engineer your business rules and the compliance rules and feed it to a bot that can give you that automated reviews, I think there is tremendous amount of scope here for us to achieve so much efficiency with this technology. And I think this is going to do a phenomenal, let's say, result as we adopt more of this, and that leaves more room for us to do creativity, right? This is the time that is kind of taken from us, which otherwise we would be looking at. And now, when you look at basic sanity check, traceability, some of the claims matrix aspects, checking your references and things like that, all of that can be achieved with this with a high degree of accuracy. Of course, we need the human in the loop, and that's going to be based on, again, the compliance requirements that we have, and the need for it still be there. But I think, to your point, technology is a great enabler, I think, here, and especially with the advent of Gen AI and agentic AI, I see a lot of scope. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Man, I have so many questions for you guys. I'm trying to get through some of these topics so we before we run out of time. So I'm going to pose the same question to both of you because we have to move on to the next theme. But I think although it's the fourth and final theme, it may have the greatest impact overall. So that's really about how does organizational culture influence MLR decisions or our approach to MLR and even adoption of AI that both of you have just spoken to? So maybe we could start with you, Carlin, on that notion.
Yeah, I mean, also bridging back from our last topic around the use of AI, I'm really struck by an example from 20 years ago, right? Which was around a chess tournament where there were two amateur players with an AI that were playing against grandmasters as well as just other AI bots. And at the end of the day, the combination of the humans plus the AI won, right? And what that tells me is the most impactful brain power that we have is that when we have humans who are leveraging AI tools appropriately. So almost using AI as collaboration. And that ties in, to the beginning of our conversation where we think about how can we enable innovation, how can we enable creativity, and that comes down to making sure that we live in a culture of collaboration, that we have clear boundaries in place, right? So whether we think from the AI perspective, having those trained on clear rules, but also within our organizations, clear policies that create that ecosphere, right? To allow that trust, to Pankaj's point, to come in and the collaboration to really ensure that we can innovate to achieve our objectives.
Great, thank you. Pankaj, can you weigh in briefly on this, please, also about,
Sure.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, briefly is a little bit of a struggle for me, but I will try. So I agree with Colin. I think when we think of culture and mindset, I think collaboration, of course, is at the center of this. And culture, as I say, right? I think as we say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think culture will eat technology for breakfast all day long here if we don't have the right culture and the mindset uh, to be able to uh, adopt that technology, and especially the Gen AI and agentic AI pieces that we are talking about, because it requires everybody to participate and everybody to be upskilled in that way to even use this. So I think culture is a huge piece of the MLR process, and because of the collaborative nature of it, I think 100%. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So, I originally intended, you saw me taking notes, looking up and down, where I was going to try to summarize our discussion, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to throw out a couple of keywords I heard, which was, art versus science, obviously collaboration, risk sharing, culture eating strategy, and AI for breakfast. And so the insights that you both have provided have been phenomenal. And I just like, on a final note, a couple of questions were pre-submitted, but I'll just pose it. If you just give me one statement, each of you, on the same, I'm gonna give you the same question. I have a list of them, but what advice would you give to teams struggling to find the right balance between, creativity and rigor within the process? And we'll start with you, Carlin. Just one statement.
Or one statement would be make sure that you're aligning from the highest levels, right? And make sure that you can really trust each other and you try to put yourselves in each other's shoes, right? You're all experts around the table. Come together, identify what is causing that friction, start with the alignment, and then trust in each other and trust in the team that you can get there.
Thank you. And Pankaj, what would be your final statement on advice to others?
I would say understand the business objectives, align around the business objectives and the goal for the exercise, and trust each other, right? Build the trust. Yeah.
So there are our attendees have heard the final words from both of you. I cannot thank you both enough for the dialogue and lending us your expertise and committing to the time to do this. So I thank you very much, and I really do look forward to continued conversations and insights from both of you outside of this forum. But again, thank you both very much, and just have a great day.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.